Rachel and Leah was twins, and Zilpah and Bilhah was twins. And they both know this, the Ruach HaKodesh, they know they're supposed to have 12 children. 12 children. So Rivka, Leah, long story, but I know the rabbi says, come speak. Thank you. Good evening, Rabbi. I want to tell you something about the laws of Kashut, very important. The question is like this. When a person goes and buys something, some kind of mutzar, some kind of a product in the store, does it require rabbinic supervision? That's the question. You know, when you go to buy something, item in the store, does it require hechsher? It has to say over there, kasher, you know, kasher this, kasher that, right? All kinds of companies, all kinds of organizations. Does it require hechsher? That's the question. So the truth is that we don't find anywhere in the Torah that we require hechsher on most products. I'll give you an example of what products I'm talking about. For instance, let's talk about tomato paste, right? Things like this, which is made out of vegetables. Or things which are made out of fruits, let's say. Fruit products, which are in a can. Or we're talking about things which are like fruit drinks, fruit juice, or oil, or cider, or beer. Does beer require hechsher? Does it have to have supervision from the rabbis? That's the question, right? All kinds of things like this. So the truth is that if you look into the Gemara, Masechet Avodah Zarah, second parak, talks about this over there. That parak is called En Ma'amidin. It says over there, and also on the Rambam, Hilchot Isurei Machalot Asurot, which is in the last parak of that series, Machalot Asurot, Forbidden Foods, parak 17, Yud Zayin. Also, there's a Shulchan Aruch in Yordea, which talks about this in several places, Kuf Yud Bet, and other places as well. So over there, they talk about certain foods which don't require hechsher, don't require rabbinic supervision. So first of all, right, the most famous one out of these is the oil. So what happened was, there's a history behind this, which is that the rabbis got together, a certain generation, in times of Tanaim, and they forbade the oil of goyim. They forbade to use the oil of goyim. So what does that mean? I can't use olive oil or some kind of, or vegetable oil, which is made by a goy. So then what happened was that got together another bet din afterwards, and they bottled this takana. They nullified this takana. That's what happened. So after they nullified it, what they said was, you're allowed to use the oil of any goy, any oil made by any goy. So what are we talking about? That doesn't require hechsher. That's what it is, right? Doesn't require hechsher. So the question is, why not, right? Maybe the goy put something non-kosher in there. Maybe he puts over there some animal stuff and all kinds of things, or all kinds of other issues there. Maybe he does all kinds of things, or maybe he cooks something in there. Maybe the goy cooked the oil, and because it's cooked, it's not allowed because it's cooked by a goy. That's another thing which also requires questioning. So then we have also another question about the oil. Maybe it's really not kosher oil. Maybe it's made from animals or whatever. That's the question. So how do we solve that problem? How do we get by with that problem? So the answer is, Rabbi, says the Rambam, explains the Rambam over there, Hilchot Machalot Asurot, that there's no problem with any of these questions. What does that mean? It's not the derech of the goyim to put non-kosher ingredients in the oil. And this is one of the reasons why you're allowed to have oil of non-Jews. Because usually when they tell you, it's vegetable oil or it's olive oil, they're not going to put something else in there. They don't do that. It's just not their way. So because it's not their way, even though there is a slight chance that maybe, they did something, but we're not really concerned about that. So the truth is, according to what we see over there in the Rambam, the rule is that when it's not the way of the going to do a certain thing, we're not really worried about they're going to do it. Because it's not their way to cook like that. It's not their way to produce like that. This is the reason why. So therefore comes the Rambam and says something amazing. He says that the oil of the non-Jews is mutar. What does that mean? It doesn't require to have OU over there or anything like that. It doesn't require. But not only that, he says that whoever says, if a rabbi comes and says, or some Jew, whatever, comes and says, the oil is asur, unless it has OU, right? Or it has OK, or whatever, some kind of hechsher, right? So says the Rambam, this person is a big sinner, Rashat Yario. That's what he says, the Rambam. If a person says like this, that oil requires hechsher, he's a big sinner. He's a Rasha. What's the reason why? So says the Rambam, the reason is because you're going against the Bet Din. The Bet Din, the big high court, the Sanhedrin, came and said it's a mutar. And you're coming and saying that it's asur. Who gave you the right to do such a thing like that? You know? This is the reason why. So therefore the Rambam speaks very strongly against that. That you're not allowed to say that it's not allowed to have that oil without the OU. That's a very important thing to understand. So not only that, he says also something else. Even if the goy cooked the oil, you know, and let's say he cooked something in there, you know, he made some chicken nuggets, let's say, right? He made the oil like that. And he took it out then from the pan, he put it in the bottle and he sold it. So now chicken nuggets over there, right, in my oil. The taste of the chicken nuggets. So is that allowed to have such a thing like that? That's the question. So the answer is, Rabbatai, that you're allowed to have it anyway, says the Rambam. What's the reason why you're allowed to have it anyway? Even though he made chicken in there, in that oil. So says the Rambam, no ten tam mifgam. What does that mean? It's giving you a bad taste in the oil, you know? Nobody wants to have a taste of meat inside his oil. It makes the taste bad. So therefore, since it's a bad taste that it's adding to the oil, so therefore, even if the goy cooked it with some chicken or whatever, you know, it's still allowed to use that oil. Can you imagine? People don't know these things. Right? That's what the Rambam says. So not only that, right, but also there's a question, what about, there's a prohibition also of food that was cooked by a goy. Right? So it talks about that in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Rambam, everywhere. It talks about that also, that was cooked by a goy. So what's the answer? The answer is that it's something which can be eaten raw also, you know, these things. So therefore, even if it's cooked by a goy, there's no problem. So what does that mean? Let's say if the oil is made out of olives, or it's made out of vegetables, you know, some kind of vegetables, right? Corn oil, right? Whatever it is, right? So corn and olives, you know, all these things, a person can also, you know, olives, you can eat them raw, you know, or let's say, you know, carrots or whatever, right? All kinds of things like this. You can eat them raw. So therefore, there's no prohibition to use it like that as well. And also, there's another thing, which is that even like, let's say corn, right? Corn, it's very hard when it's raw. So it's hard to eat it like that. But nevertheless, anyway, it's allowed. Why? Because nobody invites you, doesn't go on the Shulchan Melachim. Nobody invites you to eat oil, you know, in his house, right? Nobody invites you for that. So therefore, it's not considered to be something which is chashuv, something important. So therefore, even if the goy cooked the oil, still it's allowed to have. So what do we see from there? We see from there that there are certain foods which don't require rabbinic supervision. This is what we see, you know? So it's an important thing to understand. There's also more cases like that. We also have other things. For instance, I'll give you an example, right? Let's say a person took some fruit and made some juice, you know? Orange juice, strawberry juice, apple juice. Does that require OU? So comes the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam, and says, no, it does not require. Why doesn't it require? Because the goyim don't usually put things which are not kosher and things like this. You know, what is he going to do? He's going to sell you orange juice and put over there some lobster. What is he going to do? Lobster juice? What is he going to put in there? He's not going to do that because the taste is going to get really bad. You know, so therefore the rule is that since it's not the way for them to put non-kosher ingredients in foods like this, you're allowed to have it. This is the rule. You know. So another example is beer. You know, for instance, right? Now, did you ever notice, by the way, when it comes to beer, there's no beer with hechsher, no such a thing like that, right? Heineken, Miller, Budweiser, all these beers don't have hechsher. So how do we drink them? We do drink them, right? How do we drink them? There's no hechsher. So the answer is that beer doesn't require hechsher. You know, that's the answer, right? If it did, we wouldn't be able to drink those things. Or what about, let's say, whiskey, right? You know, we have all kinds of whiskeys over here. You know, everybody loves them. People like to drink them on Shabbat also, you know, they enjoy that, whatever, right? So the question is, does whiskey require hechsher? The answer is no. Because usually people don't put their non-kosher ingredients. Nobody knows what's in that whiskey, by the way, for sure. What? I'm sorry. Cognac is a problem. You know why? Because it has grapes in it. That's why it's something else. What does that mean? So when it has grape juice, you know, or wine, cognac, we know it's not that good. This is the problem, you know? Yeah, it needs hechsher, right, exactly. So there are things, you know, we're going to get that also. We're going to talk about that as well. But there are things which require hechsher. There are things which don't require hechsher. So when it comes to beer, it does not require hechsher. But there is a little bit of a caveat there. There's a little bit of condition, you know. The rabbis actually did make they made a takana not to drink beer of a goy. But it depends on when you drink it, where you drink it, you know. That's the question. Where you cannot drink it, you know, is the place where they produced it. If you go over there and drink it over there, where at the company, at the mifal, the factory where they made the beer. So over there, you're not allowed to drink it. But once they left the factory, and it went on the truck, and they sold it in the store, so then you're allowed to drink it. This is the reason why we're lenient to drink beer, which is found in the store. We go to the store, we buy it. Did you ever see somebody who says, oh, you can't drink this beer because it doesn't have a hechsher, doesn't have OU? There is no beer with OU. No such a thing like that. You ever notice that? Right? Or whiskey also, right? There's no whiskey with hechsher, almost nothing. Maybe from Israel you'll find something, But all the other whiskeys which are made outside of Israel, you're not going to find any hechsher on a whiskey. Right? Because the truth is, why is it, by the way, that these things don't have hechsher? Beer and whiskey and things like this. You know why? Because the company that makes it doesn't allow the rabbis to go in there. They don't want the rabbis going in there and checking what they're doing. They don't want that. You know why? Because they have some secrets over there, how they make it. They have some special ingredients over there, They don't want the rabbis to see these things. This is the reason why they don't allow, So because of that, you usually don't find any hechsher on any of these kinds of drinks. But anyway, is it allowed to drink it? Yes, you're allowed to drink it because we know that they don't put nothing non-kosher in there. This is the reason why. Another thing would be like, let's say Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola is a good example, right? Or Sprite, things like this, Does that really require hechsher? No, it doesn't require hechsher because we know it's kosher. We know what's in there, Even though Coca-Cola, they say it has some secret ingredients over there. But those secret ingredients are all spices, They're not really something which is non-kosher, No animal pieces there, all kinds of animal things there going on. So all these things are kosher. That's the idea, So as our friend pointed out, there's an exclusion over here, right? There's an exception. The exception is that you're not allowed to have wine or grape juice, which is made by a goy. Why is that? Because the rabbis made a decree on these things. The truth is that according to halakha, there's no difference between wine and grape juice. It's the same thing. We call everything wine, yain. Everything is called yain, Whether it's brand new, kedem, like this kind of thing, or whether it's 6 years aged or 10 years aged, we still call that wine. It doesn't have any other designation. There's no such a thing as grape juice in halakha. Everything is wine. But the truth is, once the goy touched that wine, and he shook it or something like that, shek, with his hand, you're not allowed to have that anymore. So therefore, this is the reason why we do require hechsher on wines. We do require. This is the thing. Because we know that if the goy touched it, it's no good. But when it comes to other fruit juices and other drinks, we don't have such a problem like that. Only with wine and grape juice. This is the things that, right? Now, cognac is also a problem, as our friend mentioned. Why? Why is it a problem, cognac? Because cognac is made out of grapes. That's the same thing, right? Grape juice or wine or whatever, right? It's made out of products like that. So therefore, since the cognac is made out of grape stuff, therefore you're not allowed to have it. The truth is, I called actually, I remember like 20 or 30 years ago, the Welch's, grape juice, Welch's, which is non-Jewish.
Not kosher, not kosher.
Right, not kosher, right? But maybe this was before your time. How old are you, Avi?
45.
45. Like, maybe you remember, right? About 30 years ago, when you were 15, when you were a teenager, at that time Welch's was kosher. What does that mean? That it had OU. Did you know that?
I remember.
Yeah, I remember. Okay. So the question is, what changed now, right? All of a sudden, right? Welch's was kosher, and it's not kosher. What happened? It's a different kind of juice now, or they're making something else? It's a different kind of material there. No, it's the same thing. What changed, right?
It's a company.
Olam kemin hagon oheg. Everything is the same. So then what's the difference? The difference is that they're not paying the OU anymore to give them extra. It's all about money. It's all business. So they're not paying the OU. When they pay the OU, they'll get a hechsher. When they don't pay the OU, they don't get a hechsher. That's the idea, But the question is Welch's grape juice, is it allowed to have that or not, right? Now it doesn't have OU. So the truth is, I called that company, Welch's. I called them up, and I spoke to one of their representatives. And what I found out was something interesting, What I asked them was like this. I said, do the workers in the company over there, right, the factory, do they touch the wine or they don't touch it? Or it's all machine, everything is right, automated. This is what I asked them. So you know what they told me? They said, no, actually nobody touches it. The only time they touch it sometimes is when they take the grapes and put it into the big cauldron, that pot, whatever, right, whatever that is, right, that container to make the juice. That's the only time they touch it. So what does that mean? That even Welch's ben met, according to what they told me, is allowed to have. You're allowed to have Welch's. Why is that? Because the goy never touches the wine. Never touches the juice. What does he touch? Maybe the grapes he touches. But the grapes is not a problem, right? Only when it's made into a wine, it becomes a problem when the goy touches it. Because you could do over there nesek, right? Yain nesek. But once everything is automated, so then it's not really a problem anymore, you know? So therefore, the truth is that Welch's really should not be a problem at all to drink. Even though they used to have OU before, now it doesn't have OU, but nothing has really changed, you know? It's still the same thing that it was before. Except that they're not paying the OU anymore. That's the difference. Right? So if you really care about that so much, they're not paying the OU, so then don't drink it. What can I tell you? But otherwise, right, if you don't really care about that so much, then you got no problem. So therefore, right, Rabbi, things like this. There's also other kinds of foods. Let's talk about fruits, for instance, right? Fruits. So says the Rambam that there are certain kinds of fruits which are allowed to have even if they're cooked by a goy. What are those? The ones that can be eaten raw. Any fruit that can be eaten raw, you know, even if it was cooked by a goy, you're allowed to have. This is a general rule. So therefore, it depends on what it was, you know. So the truth is that you have to have a good rabbi, you know, to ask questions about this, who knows these things. You know, to ask him, what about this, rabbi? What about this? You know, ask him, you know, and then once you ask him, if the rabbi knows what he's doing, he's competent about halakha, so he'll explain to you all these things and give you an answer. So that's what I'm telling you, Rabbi. That there are certain things which are allowed, certain things which are not allowed. What about, let's say, tomato paste, right? Something very simple. Right? So you take the tomato paste. What does it say over there, right? Tomatoes, water, and maybe salt, right? Maybe, I don't know. That's salt, right? So do you need Rabbanut on this? Do you need Hechsha on this? No, you don't need. Because it's just tomatoes there. What's the problem, right? Even if they cooked it, what do I care about that? Why? Because it can be eaten also raw tomatoes, you know? So I don't really care. You know? So what about the question, you know, so the famous question is like this, you know? Maybe they're putting something non-kosher in there and they're not telling you, you know? It's Mulevia, you know? What about that? So the answer is, you know, that according to halakha, whatever it's not the way for the goy to put something non-kosher, we don't suspect that they do. It's not their way to do that, you know. So since it's not their way, we don't really care. You know, what is he going to put in there? What is he going to put grape juice in there and the tomato paste? Nobody does that.
So what about honey?
Another good question. But you reminded me, right? So it says in the Shulchan Aruch, it says in the Rambam, that honey of the goy is mutar.
The question is, so why do we have the OU step?
Because of business.
So does that mean that it's really about business? That's what it is?
I'll tell you something, you know, I'm exaggerating a little bit. I'm exaggerating. But I'll tell you why, Yossi.
Because if you want to say something like this, position.
Yeah.
A lot of people are believers and they have traditions.
Right.
They will say, you see, it's all about money. And they're twisted.
But let me explain that to you though, okay? Because really the truth is, you know, I'm telling you money, but that's also true. But there's also another side of it, which is that there's also an element of business over there, but there's also an element of kashut as well. What does that mean? Not everybody knows all these laws, you know, about what's mutar and what's asur. You know, this is very confusing for most people. So therefore, when you have a hechsher, it helps you, you know, to know what's allowed and what's not allowed. So it's very convenient to have that. You know what I mean? This is Ms. Bechila.
Here's a question
Yeah.
about if sardines in oil are kosher.
We're going to talk about that in a second, right? Remind me not to forget that. It's a very good question, right? So the truth is that, as we said, right, that the OU has two goals, right? One is to make it easier for you, to give you the option, you know, to always buy something. You don't have to check nothing. You don't have to check the ingredients. You don't have to worry about anything. Just buy it, you know, and that's it, right? You're good. So it's very convenient, you know. So it's actually a good service for the community, on the one hand. On the other hand, they're also making a lot of money with, you know, there's a lot of money there. You know what I mean? So there's both things involved. But the truth is, you know, if you look back, like 100 years back, you know, go back, there was no hechsher from anybody. No such thing like that, you know. No goy would allow you 100 years ago to go into his factory and check what he's doing over there. Today they allow you, you know. Today things are different. You know, but in those days nobody allowed that. So there was no hechsher in the old days. You know? So now what about the question of honey, right? So says the Rambam, says the honey of the goyim is mutar. Right? There's no problem. So the truth is, you know, so why they put OU? Because, you know, it's convenient, whatever, right? You know, it's business also, you know. So it serves two purposes, you know, dual purpose. Which is good, you know, I have nothing against it, by the way, don't get me wrong, you know. I have nothing against companies that do hechsher. But you should know, by the way, that there are certain companies that do hechsher, that do a hechsher which is not really so good. You know? There's the tablet K, you know, which is not really so reliable. You know, and the triangle K also has some leniencies, you know, that they do. You know, so not every hechsher is 100% always good. You know, so sometimes the hechsher is really good. What about the OU, by the way? Are they good?
Yeah, sure.
You know, the truth is, generally they're good, but they do have some places where they're a little bit weak. You know, a little bit weak spot there. So the honey is definitely allowed. There's no question about that. Now, what about sardines, right? Somebody asked about sardines. So the truth is, you know, that we buy sardines all the time. You know, they're made by Goyim. They're not made by Jews, these sardines. We buy it. We have no problem with that. You know why? The reason is because you can see the fish. The fish is whole. You don't tell you, you know, so you can see the scales on the fish. So it's a kosher. We see that it has scales. You know? So the fish is kosher. Because if it has scales, it's kosher. That's the rule, you know? This is the rule.
I say scales in Georgian? Scales?
I don't know, sorry.
Is it scales?
I wish I knew. Look it up in the dictionary. Kaskasim, yeah, kaskasim, exactly right. So if it has scales, the sardines are kosher. But what about the fact that they cook the sardines? They cook it, right? You know, how is that kosher? It's cooked by a goy. This is the question, right? So you know what the answer is? The answer is that they're not really cooking the sardines. So what are they doing? They're steaming it. They're smoking it. It's smoked or steamed, right? So when it comes to halacha of kashut, right? When a goy uses something like that, steaming and smoking, it's not really called bishul. It's not called cooking. So therefore, if a goy made, it says in Mefurash, it says in the Rabbi and the Shulchan Aruch, if a goy made fish like this by steaming it or whatever, or salting it or pickling it, you know, like herring, for instance, right? Herring is a good example, right? They make herring silotka, and you know, if you can see the scales there, you know that it's a kosher fish. So even if it doesn't have a hechsher, you can have that. Why? Because they don't cook it in the pot. What they do is they smoke it, or they salt it, or they pickle it. They use vinegar to make it like that. That's the way they prepare it. It doesn't really require cooking, you know. So this is the reason why. So there are certain things which are allowed to have. There are certain things which are not allowed to have. What about bread, by the way, right? So the truth is that, you know, there was also a takana. We talked about this before. There was a takana that the rabbis made not to eat bread of the goyim. But then what happened was that people weren't able to keep it. So the rabbis canceled this takana. You know, they went back on it.
Why
It was
did they
canceled.
know?
It was
Why did they
nullified.
know? Why?
So what happens is like this, right? It was canceled, but not totally canceled. Some of it was kept a little bit. So what does that mean? According to our custom, the custom is like this. According to Shulchan Aruch, that if you can find kosher bread, Jewish bread, better to have Jewish bread. If you can't, you can have also kosher bread. Now the question is like this, right? The kosher bread you can have when the Jewish bread is not available. Does it require OU or not? And the answer is no. According to the Rambam, according to Shulchan Aruch, there's no OU there. So then what do we rely on? We're relying on the fact that it's not their way to put non-kosher ingredients in bread. This is what we're relying on. By the way, there are some places I heard in the world where they do put non-kosher ingredients in the bread. You know, they put like lard, you know, like pig fat or animal fat. They make it like that, you know. So if you live in a place like that, maybe like in South America, in a place like this, you know, where they put lard into the bread, you cannot have that, obviously, right? It's got animal fat there. Not allowed to have that, right? But in most places, it seems, you know, for sure in Israel, right, nobody puts lard into the bread. Also here in America, we don't find it very, very often. You know, the reason is, I'll tell you why. People now don't put lard in anything, you know, animal fat, because it's not healthy. You know, so therefore, most of the bakeries already stopped using lard. It's considered to be a very unhealthy food. You know, the only thing which is left over, which has lard, you know, is Twinkies. The Twinkies have lard. You know, I think they still make it with lard because it has a special taste you can only get with lard. Twinkies, you know. But besides that, I don't see anything in the market today which has lard. So therefore, right, if a person has no choice but to eat non-Jewish bread, he doesn't really need hechsher. It's better to have hechsher. It's nice, you know. It makes it easy. I can tell you also, you know, that Rabbi, our rabbi, I was told by his son, Rabbi Yosef, you know, the chief rabbi, he told us that also Maran, you know, when he used to get people coming to him, asking him questions about foods, he would check the ingredients on the can, you know, and tell them, so you're allowed to have it, you know. So, you know, he was also doing it that way. That's the way he did it. He told people, you know, this is kosher. I checked the ingredients, kosher. You know, so the truth is that having hechsher is very convenient somewhat, you know. And I'm not against it, believe me when I tell you. It's very convenient, it's very good. They're making good business also, Baruch Hashem. Well, that's good. Jews are making money. Why should you be sad about that? You should be happy. Everybody's making a living. What's the problem with that, right? No problem. We have no problem with that. But what happened is like one thing, which is that once they came out with the hechshers, the problem is that they created a misconception, which is that what? That without a hechsher, you cannot have any food like that. This is not the halakha. So this is what we have to understand, But I don't want to take too long, right? We have to do arbit. But what I'm telling you is like this: that bottom line, that even though we said, right, technically speaking, you don't need a hechsher on many foods, but you should have a rabbi, who teaches you how to do these things. Because if you try to do it by yourself, and you haven't learned all the halachot of kashrut, you're gonna fall on your face, God forbid, right? You're gonna fail like that. So make sure you have a good rabbi by your side who can tell you what's kosher and not kosher, and everything will be B'ezrat Hashem, peachy and rosy and healthy and happy. Everybody should be healthy and happy with wealth, health, and success. Amen, amen. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen, amen. Rabbi Chanina Kashamer Tzakadosh Baruch Hu Israel. Rabbi Chanina Bar Lan Torah Mitzvah Shem Adonai Chafetz. Le'ma'as Yitgo Yagdir Torah V'Yadir.